Hello, my name is Sarah Downing, and today I would like to speak a little about the hops plant and its medicinal uses. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get started on this fascinating journey. On our journey today, we will be looking at the cultivation practices, historical and current uses, medicinal value, as well as looking into a few conclusions that we can gather based on the uses and future predictions of hops as a crop. First, it's important to recognize the biology of this plant. It's in the family Cannabaceae, the same family that houses cannabis sativa and indica. Humulus lupulus is a dioecious vining plant believed to have originated in China, although it may be contested by some who add possibly Eastern Europe and North America to that list, but either way, it is now established throughout much of the world. And you can see here pictured a mature hops bract. As you can see here, this is a representation of the hops plant. A right here is showing the young shoot. B is the male flowers, which is very interesting. C are some young leaves. We have some female inflorescence here in D. The most interesting part of this to me would be the letter F here, the single mature hop cone. That is where the medicinal properties are found that we are going to be talking about. It is inside of these bracts that these special oils and compounds are extracted. So that is where the magic happens. The hops plant is an herbaceous perennial for most of the United States, zone 3 through 8, so it can easily be grown in the home garden. The female plants are generally more attractive than their male counterparts, as the females produce the cone that houses most of the compounds that have the human medicinal value. The male hop plant is generally used just for seed production, and monoecious plants can occur. The part of the plant that is interesting and useful to humans is the flowers or cones that hold the resins and medicinal compounds that make this plant so attractive to humans. It is largely cultivated in the Pacific Northwest, as we will talk about in our next slide. The United States produces more hops than anywhere else in the world, followed closely by Germany and Ethiopia. Of those countries listed, hop farms in the Pacific Northwest region, specifically Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, comprise approximately 96% of total United States hop acreage. 1 acre of hops consists of a little under 900 plants, each of which can produce upwards of 2 pounds of cones. Here's something that I found quite interesting in this research is how the commercial setup looks. What does it look like? What would it look like if I set this up successfully? How have people set this up successfully? Maximum production in this setup at Rutgers University was maximum production is obtained using very high trellises, and we're talking 16 to 20 feet high. You can see here the high trellises, you can see those. This is before planting, and then obviously this is after. They spaced the individual plants about 3 feet apart within the rows, and about 12 feet apart for the rows. So within the rows, they're 3 feet apart, and then the rows line 12 feet apart, and they have a total of 900 plants per acre. Work done previously at Rutgers University examined the use of a low trellis production system. The system used a 6-foot high versus the possibly 20-foot high standard, and results indicated that yield was diminished significantly to the point of not even being financially viable. Again, in a backyard setup, if you didn't have a 20-foot setup, that you're not trying to make money off of, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. Grow it over a trellis, grow it over some sort of a support or a fence. But if you want to be financially viable, you need to set it up right so that your plants can perform maximally. Disease management could be an issue when using the lower trellis production systems, since far less airflow is going through that plant canopy. So your moisture levels go way up and you increase your disease occurrence as well. I was fascinated to learn about the ancient and historical uses, and I believe you will be too. It wasn't just always used for making beer. Hops has been around for a long time and being used medicinally. So let's get started here. 1552, 1069 BCE, flourishing beer exports began in the Mediterranean region. Hops was not used in this process. The beer had a very low alcohol content. It was technically just a water alternative because this beer didn't store well or keep well. I'm guessing because of the low alcohol content, and also hops is known for its antibacterial, antiseptic properties. So this would have done well to add hops to this beer, but they hadn't gotten there yet. Late in the BCE years, hops reached some popularity when there was antibacterial properties that were noticed. In the early Roman era, hops cultivation was beginning and introduced to the brewing process. In 736 CE, beer brewing with hops was first mentioned in a monastery document. Tenants were expected to gather hops from the wild, so this was not, I guess, a major agricultural production. This was wild gathering. Later, in the late 14th century, hop gardens reached mainland Europe. By the 15th century, there was actually a prohibition on hops by Kings Henry VII and VIII because hops were believed to be unhealthy, and the culture was ale dominated, made of malt, honey, and spices. That is an ale for you: malt, honey, and spices, no hops. So since that was the favored drink of the time and hops was, prohibited, the ale was very, very popular. By the 17th century, hop growing was introduced in North America, and in 1648, we have evidence of the first commercial production in Massachusetts of hops. We've talked quite a bit about the relationship of hops and beer, so I'll move on to other current uses. Since Humulus lupulus is a close relative of hemp, Cannabis sativa, the hop plant has similarly long fibers that have been used for making ropes, paper, and linen-like cloth. One quality of the hops plant that I would like to focus on is the medicinal properties that are gaining in popularity in modern times and have been studied in several recent clinical trials. Along with antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties, Humulus lupulus has been tested under clinical trials to treat some of the following conditions: treatment of sleep disorders, depression, anxiety, HIV, cancer, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, obesity, liver disease, colitis, cardiovascular diseases, cognitive impairment, tension headaches, and the list just goes on and on. If you're interested, this is a great topic of research for further education. The first medicinal property that I'm going to speak about hops is the sedative effects, how it helps you sleep. The sedative effects were first noticed in early cultivation. It was noticed that people that were gathering hops and working with the plants were getting extremely drowsy by the end of their working day as they're harvesting the hops, as they're working around them, breathing them in all day long, and some of them were actually falling asleep by the end of the day. Humulone is also a compound that is in hops, and it exhibits a sedative or hypnotic effect. I know some of you might have noticed this, but synergy with ethanol, which is the alcohol, in GABA receptors may contribute in further enhancement in alcohol intoxication when you are drinking a high hopped beer. The next property of hops that I would like to talk about is what we use it for depression, anxiety, and stress. There was a study that they did that was randomized, double-blind, a crossover pilot study that compared the effects of a dry extract supplement on young, healthy adults who have depression, anxiety, and stress. The results are significant reduction in depression, stress, anxiety. A little bit about this. While there was no significant changes in body weight or morning cortisol levels, anxiety, depression, and stress scores were significantly reduced over a 4-week trial period. And all of these are self-reported through a survey. No participants experienced adverse side effects, which is positive. And the study also suggested that hops may have an overall beneficial mood-enhancing effect without significant adverse side effects in treatment-naive individuals presenting with symptoms of anxiety, stress, and depression. Another benefit that I would like to talk about that humans use hops for is to help control obesity with our current Western type diet. In the study, mice were fed a Western type diet. Mice were given potassium salt of isohumulone, which was derived from hops. The result was that there was significantly improved glucose tolerance and inhibited Western type diet induced body weight gain. Therefore, hops derived tetrahydroisoA acids is an alternative therapeutic for the prevention of type 2 diabetes due to its function in normalizing insulin sensitivity and improving glucose tolerance. So the next medicinal value of hops that I want to talk about is the extract of xanthahumol. This is an important compound that is a prenylated chalcone from the hops plant that is identified as a broad-spectrum cancer chemopreventative agent. Xanthahumol exhibits antibacterial activity. The hop bitter acids inhibit mainly gram-positive bacteria and include some species of Bacillus, Micrococcus, Staphylococcus, Mycobacterium, and Streptomycetes. Xanthahumol exhibits antibacterial activity. It is used to treat HIV-1 because of inhibitory effects of HIV-induced CPE, as well as the production of a viral antigen and reverse transcriptase activity as measures of active retroviral replication. All of that means that it is very useful in treating patients with HIV. Xanthocumol exhibits antifungal activity as it inhibited the growth of dermatophytic fungi more effectively than the positive control. Xanthocumol exhibits antimalarial action. Malaria caused by infection is one of the most deadly diseases with more than 1 million deaths annually. Malaria is generally treated with chloroquine. However, the emergence of drug-resistant strains has reduced its efficacy. In a recent study, antimalarial activity was confirmed. Xanthocumol exhibits anti-cancer benefits. It induces cancer cell death and inhibits tumor growth without reducing body weight of the patient in a 7-day trial in mice. In a 3-week trial, there was a significant reduction in relative tumor volume and weight compared to the control. It also significantly reduced the levels of tumor proliferating cells. Another property of the hops plant that we need to discuss is hops that is being formulated as an insecticide. It is derived from the essential oil of the plant. It is considered eco-friendly with low toxicity to most mammals. It can be effective against the spotted wing Drosophila, one species of mosquito, some weevils, mites, and borers. Doesn't have a huge use among insects. Using the spent hops as a source for hop oil would be an easy and economically convenient solution because of the large amount of spent hops available as a byproduct of the brewing industry. What conclusions can we gather about the future of the cultivation of hops? One important component to consider is the effect of climate change on this crop. Growing conditions, which is soil conditions, moisture, microclimate, have impact on aroma and potency of the plant. Polyphenols and bitter acid contents of hops are altered based on the place of growth and the harvest year. The hop plant is among the more vulnerable crop plants and is already being affected by changing growing conditions, especially vulnerable to drought and heat wave events, and these weather conditions are only expected to increase. Yields have been stagnating in some areas due to shifts toward higher temperatures, and this in turn affects the water availability to the plants. Even a short-term lack of water will cause these plants to react quickly. This causes rapid dysfunction of the whole plant. Changes in plant diseases and pests will likely be caused by climate change in this plant. So all that to say that this hop plant is vulnerable to changing conditions. So if we want to continue to harvest this plant for medicinal purposes, we are really going to have to pay attention to where we're growing it, the conditions that we're giving it, etc. Some changes to hop crop cultivation as a result of climate change that we may need to make as growers would be shading. As things get hotter and drier, we might need to be protecting those plants a little bit more at critical, stressful periods in the plant's life. Or transferring cultivation to higher altitudes or more humid areas. But these are difficult because these are long-lived perennial crops, not annuals. A possible benefit would be that poor weather conditions have been shown to increase production of xanthocumol and its derivatives, which in turn can possess antifungal properties. So putting a little bit of stress on the plant can in turn trigger an antifungal response, which can be beneficial to the plant and those who wish to harvest it for its antifungal properties. There is an example of a Canadian Humulus lupulus that has exhibited elevated xanthocumol concentrations under a high disease pressure. This provides better bittering capability for brewing. So they're looking at this. Some more climate change effects. The quality of the hops, measured as alpha acid content, has been declining in some areas, such as the Czech Republic, due to changing climate conditions, especially low precipitation and hostile temperatures. Higher concentrations of CO2 can negate some of these effects, but to what extent is still pretty unclear. And as we come to the works cited slide, I would just like to thank you for coming along with me on this journey. I know I have learned a lot, and I hope that I have imparted some of that information to you to spur you to discover more about this amazing plant that we have not fully employed everything that we can for the medicinal extraction and use of the Humulus lupulus plant.